Доброго ранку.
Раз, два, три. Шановні колеги, ті, які в Zoom, скажіть, будь ласка, мене чутно?
Так,
Так,
чути.
чутно.
Да, супер. Ми буквально скоро будемо розпочинати. Зараз буквально ще підійде спікер. А, Хотів би просто технічне питання з приводу презентації. Презентації я буду виводити на екран ваші. Єдине прохання, тоді ви, як той, хто буде доповідати по презентаціям, просто там кажіть next slide, щоб я мав розуміння, коли його гортати. Дякую.
Всі вже на місці.
Okay, dear colleagues, should we start? Yeah, because it's already 10:09. So what I would like to say, on behalf of WWF Ukraine, on behalf of myself, I extend a warm regards to all of you who managed to gather here today. Also, I would like to say that we will have during this discussion a set of good speakers, very well-known speakers. And this event, which we will have today, it's focused on nature-based solutions, mainly for forests and water. Climate change is that action which require common actions. And of course, nature-based solutions would not be overestimated during this climate agenda. I also think that nature-based solutions should be one of the important parts while we speak about restoration and recovery of our beautiful country. 1 year ago, my colleagues from WWF Ukraine, together with our partners from Sweden, during the full-scale war, managed to have nice research on nature-based solutions and how nature-based solutions could commit to Ukraine. Considering the fact that Ukraine would like to reach climate neutrality till 2060, and this is pretty ambitious target, nature-based solutions could be mainstreamed. And when we speak about this, we can remind clean energy, sustainable agriculture, good water and forest management, keeping biodiversity. All this, it's concrete call to actions. But today, as I told, we'll focus on forests and water. I have to say that not all of participants, of all speakers, managed to come here in person because of war and different circumstances. But I believe that we will manage to have good discussion today. And me as a moderator, what I would like to ask you and myself maybe, that this discussion lead to concrete further actions, which go far away, far beyond these walls of this Ukrainian pavilion or even COP pavilions in Dubai. And a few words about housekeeping rules. So when that speakers who participate here offline, when we will speak, we will change places. To ask next slide, just say next slide. For that speakers who participate online, please share your presentations on the screen and manage your slides by yourself. So this is housekeeping rules, and try to be to make your presentation maybe in 7 minutes in order to leave some room for questions, discussions, and summary. And now I would like to give a word to Mr. Oleg Bondarenko. Mr. Oleg Bondarenko is the head of the environmental committee of Ukrainian parliament. Mr. Bondarenko is working in his capacity already for 4 years and forming actually ecological agenda. So Mr. Bondarenko, I have a question to you. What is ecological agenda now for Ukraine? And is it visible to speak on ecology considering so hard work circumstances what we have in Ukraine now? Mr. Bondarenko, floor is yours.
Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you for the invitation to speak on the panel discussion at the 28th Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. The conference serves as a crucial international platform for combating the climate crisis and holds significant influence on the national policies of participating countries. Ukraine is marching hand in hand with other nations worldwide on the path on achieving climate neutrality and decarbonization. Our key steps on this journey include signing the Vienna Convention in 1986 and ratifying the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer in 1988, ratification in 1996 of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and in 2016 of the Paris Agreement. Approval in July 2021 of the updated national determined contribution to the Paris Agreement with an ambitious goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 35% by 2030 compared to 1990. Joining the global initiative committed to jointly reducing global methane emissions by at least 30% by 2030. Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine is actively participating in this climate movement. Ukraine is committed to its climate goals, and the legislative framework we have put in place reflects our dedication to transparency, accountability, and aligning with global efforts to combat climate change. In December 2019, Ukrainian parliament passed a law on the principles of monitoring, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions, aimed at implementing mandatory methodologies for calculating greenhouse gas emissions for installation covered by the law, obtaining accurate and objective information on emissions from such installations regularly, ensuring compliance with European standards and mechanisms for monitoring, reporting, and verification of emissions, creating conditions for the introductions of market-based emissions trading systems and non-market mechanism to support the reduction of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. The Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine also anticipates the submission of a draft law for the ratification of the amendment to the Montreal Protocol of Substances that deplete the ozone layer, adopted on 2016 in Kigali Amendment. Ukraine is ready to ratify this amendment to reduce this consumption of fluorinated greenhouse gases, high global warming potential refrigerants that can significantly impact the climate. Unfortunately, due to the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine, the greenhouse gas emissions monitoring, reporting and verification system in 2022-2023 did not yield relevant results. However, this does not hinder our preparation for the implementation of an emissions trading system in Ukraine. Particularly, in January 2026, Ukrainian exporters will directly face the impact of the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, implemented by the European Union to prevent carbon pollution by imposing a charge of EU importers of goods with a carbon footprint. The introduction of an emission trading system in Ukraine is effective as the European one, along with reforming the carbon emissions taxation system, is the best solution to prevent restriction on Ukrainian exports. Therefore, the Parliament awaits the swift preparation and submission of these draft laws from the government. Furthermore, the principles of Ukraine's long-term climate policy should be reflected in a corresponding Ukrainian law. This law should establish carbon climate neutrality goals, create the architecture of climate governance in Ukraine, lay the groundwork for integrating climate change issues into our policies, implement a policy and action tracking system, and establish climate change forecasting. In addition to the challenges posed by the global climate crisis, Ukraine is confronted with the urgent challenge of Russia's war against Ukraine. This aggression directly affects the climate crisis and consequently the world as a whole. Massive fires and emissions of environmentally harmful substances, the destruction of entire cities in need of reconstruction, the devastation of wetlands, the draining of the Kakhovka Reservoir due to a terrorist act, and the destruction of entire ecosystems all impact Ukraine's ambitious climate neutrality goals set in 2021. In these conditions, Ukraine's climate policy should include mechanism for climate neutral reconstruction after Ukraine's victory in the war. Simultaneously, we remember that a comprehensive solution to the problem of global warming also depends on the effective implementation of the principles of the circular economy and the European Green Deal in Ukraine. Last year, the Ukrainian parliament adopted the framework law on waste management, which introduces approaches to reuse and resource recovery. To prevent industrial pollution, Parliament has prepared a draft law to ensure constitutional rights to a safe environment, implementing an integrated permit and best available technologies in compliance with EU Directive 2010/75/EU. I hope that today's panel discussion on nature-based solutions for Ukraine's recovery will result in quality legislative initiatives aimed at addressing the climate and other issues in our country comprehensively. Thank you.
Mr. Bondarenko, thank you for your welcome speech. And thank you, not only you, but all members of parliament for working on, working on climate issues. And I heard CBAM, which is very important. I heard NBS. And of course, we need to consider the very hard situation and ecocide which is happening in Ukraine now, unfortunately. as a consequence of this unprovoked Russian aggression against Ukraine. And now I would like to pass the word to Mr. Viktor Smal, who is the acting head of the State Agency on Forest Resources of Ukraine. And I know that Mr. Smal will present a vision on implementing close to nature practices, as well as, let's say, digitalization of timber management, which is obviously close to nature or should be close to nature. So Mr. Smal, floor is yours for presentation.
Thank you very much. Is it working? All right. Is it better? Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest to this subject. Let's start the presentation, and next slide, please. I will give you a little context of what is going on in forest industry for your better understanding of digitalization and our approaches for forest management. So first of all, last 2 years, we were working on our homework to enter European Union. Our main task is to divide management and control in forest industry, and we do so. We have created State Enterprise Forest of Ukraine. This is the biggest forest Europe now, and we are managing forests on territory as big as 7.3 million hectares. And we united 389 state enterprises, what we used to call Lysgosp, and now it's one big state enterprise. Our job is not done yet because we are working on transformation of this state enterprise into a public joint stock company that will harmonize the rules of working, and it will harmonize our entity with the European and Western standards. Next slide, please. As a result, State Enterprise Forest of Ukraine is the largest one in Europe, and we are operating using 10 regional offices. We have more than 30,000 employees working in our enterprise. Next slide, please. And another context we are dealing with every day is war. We are deeply involved in war from the very first day. We do our best to help our military forces, and we provided help from the very first day, as big as more than 4,000 wood wagons to the frontier line. We mobilized more than 1,000 vehicles of different types, and every 7th of our employee is defending our country on the frontier line with their weapon in their hands. We're paying enormous price not only in money and techniques and with our forests, but also we are paying terrific price with the lives of our employees and our people. For yesterday, 107 were killed, 164 were wounded, and 92 are missing. So that is the price of Russian peace, what they're bringing to Ukraine. Next slide, please. As a result, 3 million hectares out of 10.4 million of Ukrainian forest were impacted by war, by different means. It doesn't mean that the whole territory is mined, but the huge territory of that 3 million hectares is mined. We currently liberated 2.5 million hectares, but they are not available for management. It's dangerous to be in that type of forest, and this is the task we will be solving for next decades. And you probably know that after First World War and after Second World War, they're still working on the demining. The fields in Alsace in France, they're still under demining, and the forests near Berlin, they're also still mined. So currently Ukraine is the most mined territory, and 1/3 of our forest is, so to say, without availability for management. Regardless these obstacles, regardless the difficult times, we are performing, and on next slide you will see the result of our work. for your better understanding how big the territory of Ukrainian forest, it can be compared to the forest of Poland and to the forest of Germany. We have approximately the same area, around 10 million hectares. But another criteria I want to underline is, so to say, growth of stock. That means how many of new volume of forest we get every year. So in Ukraine, this parameter is as big as 40 million cubic meters, the same in Poland, the same 40, and they have almost 2.5 times bigger in Germany. But knowing this parameter, it's interesting to compare it to the timber harvesting volume. And in Ukraine, it's only 13 million cubic meters out of 40. In Poland and in Germany, they harvest approximately everything they have as a growth of stock. And it's fine. It's what you do. You grow forest, and when the time comes, you harvest it. But because of these tough times and tough not availability of a huge part of our forest starting from the February of 2022, we are still performing, and you will see our results on next slide, please. There is no picture. Can you please change another type of file? I provided PDF and PPTX. If you're using PowerPoint, the computer maybe is not powerful enough to show the picture, to show the results, the most interesting part of presentation. What is not working? Sorry for this technical issue. I can tell you some facts that are not in presentation. It might be interesting for you. So you understood that we have 10.4 million hectares of Ukrainian forest. It's official information according to the data that we collected and we're using from 2010. But what we did a couple of years ago, we started a project that used the satellite pictures. We were using artificial intelligence to make a research whether we really understand the real area, actual area of our forest. And what we did is we collect data. It was dated from 2020 to 2021. And the research showed that we have 1.7 million hectares of Ukrainian forest that were not counted before. That means that using that previous instruments, that was a big mistake in calculating. So what we're doing now is we are working on that area that is not that we don't count as forest officially, because it belongs to different entities. It belongs to agricultural fund, and we are working on the transpassing of these lands to Ukrainian state authority, and we are doing it pretty actively. And we created a request to local governments of different levels, and we are working currently on the new areas. All right, so we are back to presentation. The green lines show the result of 2023. and that is income from sale of wood, and that is income from the wood that decreased in volume because we didn't have the access to the whole forest. But we did show the highest record in comparison to the whole history of independent Ukraine. It is as big as 23 billion hryvnias. Next slide, please. Net profit, the highest record in the whole independent history of Ukraine, 2.4 billion hryvnias. Next slide, please. Taxes. For the different levels of taxes, we paid the biggest amount ever, and it is as big as almost 10 billion hryvnias. Every hryvnia is really precious, because in the time of war, we understand that this money, they go to our budget and help our military forces. Next slide, please. Salary, highest record in the whole history, average one in the forest industry. Next slide, please. So you understand that we are performing, but you understand that we are having some troubles in using our old approaches in forest management. For your better understanding, there are two basic approaches when you want to cut the forest. This is clear cutting method and selective cutting method. When you do the first and you want to renovate your forest, you will have to plant trees that will be the same age and the same species. And you are not creating actually a real forest, you are creating a plantation of forest. Second one is the method, and please next slide, you will understand the difference now. And there is a type in second one that we call the reforming cuttings. This is the method that allows us to create natural forest. We call this approach near to nature forestry. The difference between two different forests, this is the legacy of Soviet Union, and actually interesting fact that all countries in the world that were affected and influenced by Soviet Union, they used to use this model of forestry. What's the difference between near to nature forestry and woody crops? The difference is when you want to use one word to describe this forest, you will say vulnerability. Why? Because there is, it will have massive pest infestation if it happens, because there is usually only one dominant species. They will have total destruction by wildfire. When it happens, it goes on the top and it destroys absolutely everything. And if you have forest of the same height, it will be destroyed by that fire. And it will have destruction by storms. If it begins to fall, it falls like a dominoes. And another parameter that we used to look at our everyday work is growth of stock on 1 hectare. It means how many new cubic meter at 1 hectare we have every year. So our average parameter of this growth of stock is 4 cubic meter for 1 hectare. And the multiplication of this data gives the previous data of 40 million cubic meters per year. So remember, please, this parameter. And then we go to another type of forest, which is nature to no. Previous slide, please. We're not done with this one. So near to nature forestry type of forest. It has different age and different species structure. And if you use one word to describe that, it will be endurance. It will have resistance to pests because they will infect 1 or 2 species, but not the whole forest. It will have resistance to fire because it will have different structure and different heights of the tree. It will have endurance to storms. And our favorite parameter, growth of stock, is increasing to 12 cubic meters. How do we know that? Because we have an experiment that we have been making in Lviv region. And almost for 20 years, we were using that technology, this approach, and we can say that it is working. It's not a theory, it is working. So that is the approach that can help us to make our forest more efficient, more strong. And this is not the it. When you say that you want to grow the forest, you are not done only with this type of job. You want to make sure that your forest will be safe and the timber will be safe on the market. And for that, we need to use some of the digital instruments. Next slide, please. This is what I call digital wood tracking chain. And this is the number of digital instruments we are implementing currently in our forest industry. Some of them are implemented, some of them are on their way. I can say that this combination of instruments is absolutely unique. They don't use that type of combination in no country of the world, but we collected here the best practices. So number one is LiDAR technology. This is what we will start using next year. We are done with the technical requirements. We are done with looking for the best company that can do this job in Europe. They are doing these types of jobs for Scandinavian countries. And what that means in practice, when you want to collect the data about the volume, the exact volume that grow in some piece of land, you are using your arms, your eyes, and all methods. The difference between actual and collected data can be up to 20%. And that means that starting from this very point, it can be the huge difference of what you have really in the forest and what you have in the papers. So LiDAR technology is the technology that can create a 3D map of all the forest, and you will see every single tree growing in the forest. Having that data, it's really easy to collect the diameter, the height, and you know for sure how much volume you have in your forest. And the difference between actual data and collected data is only 1.5%. It's really, really precise. So step number 2, already implemented, electronic login ticket. What is that? This is the document you need to have when you harvest. No one in Ukraine cannot cut a single tree without having a login ticket. Before we implemented our electronic system, it happened actually less than a month ago. We were working on that system more than 2 years, and it's been first month we are currently using that in the whole territory of Ukraine. Everyone, 100% of all the forest users are using our system. So this system is accurately collecting the data about all the documents you need to have to provide the cutting. We are using our database to collect all that type of documents. And what is really important that before that, such forest users as agro лесгоспы, how we call it, and communal лесгоспы, actually there are 27% of forests of Ukraine that are not coordinated by State Forest Resources Agency. So only 73% of our Ukrainian forest is under maintenance directly from our central body entity. So what we changed by implementing of this system, that we made every user to make a request to our regional offices in order to get the document. Before that, they were often using the documents that they were issuing by themselves. And very often, when you would go to some agro-лесгосп or communal лесгосп, you will find a picture that they were harvesting and they didn't have their documents all right. So now we changed that. Going to number 3, it's mechanization of harvesting. It's efficient, it's secure, but why is it here? Why is it in this row? Because the machinery that we're using for that, we call it harvesters. We don't have a lot of them. We are only working on the purchasing these machines. We have only a couple of them in Ukraine. But what they do and what they can do when they harvest with a mechanical type of job, they collect and they get the data about the volume of trees they collect. And that is another instrument that you can compare to number 1, number 2, number 3, and then you have a clear picture of the volume that is going to the system. Step number 4, a lot has been done on this step. We have implemented electronical transportation document. We made it absolutely necessary for every forest user. A couple of weeks ago, we made an order and we started a nice experiment that collect pictures on every transportation documents. And that means that now all our state enterprises and Forest of Ukraine, all its offices, before making the vehicle with wood go to the highway, they need to make pictures of that vehicle. Why is it so interesting? Because every picture of every party, it got the unique, the unique shape. When you have a look at the vehicle, it's like the fingerprint. There is no one absolutely the same. So interesting fact that when we created all these digital instruments, we made the society also to join this process. And we have a site where you can check the plate number of the vehicle. You can actually go on highway. You can go close to the vehicle that is transporting timber. You can look at the plate number, write down on the website, and it will show the transportation document and the pictures. So without stopping the car, you can actually check whether the picture and the fingerprint of this party is actually the same, because you can see it in front of you in real life, and you can see how it looks like in collected data. It's not the it with the number 4, because next year we want to install the GPS trackers on every single vehicle, not only the state vehicles, but all the private entrepreneurs, private companies that are making services and providing services in this field. So every single vehicle will have GPS tracker. We will have a single map of these GPS trackers signals, and our patrols that are working and checking the vehicles on the road, it will be really easy for them to track the vehicle that is not on the map, but it's loaded by timber. So we're working on that, and when we will install these GPS trackers, we will have a couple of electronic validation for these vehicles. First one, whether this vehicle has a right to go into the forest, and if it does have the right to go to the forest, where is it going? It will be clear from the document. We will have the coordinates of the part of the forest that has already issued electronic login ticket, and we will be able to compare the route, and we will be able to compare the place where it's going. Second validation for that car, when it's loaded by timber, we want to make sure that all the documents are done. Because when it's loaded by timber and it doesn't have any transportation document, it can be black story, and it can be the part of black market. And how it works in practice. When the vehicle is loaded by timber, and when they prepare all the documents, sometimes they may not finish making that document. They make it like a working document, like a copy. So that kind of vehicle can go to the highway, and if it's being stopped by the police or by us, they just finish the creation of the document, and that's it. But we want to make sure automatically that the document is being created in the forest. You may ask, and I'm being frequently asked about the coverage of mobile network. We don't need that. We don't need to create a GPS dot on the map that will be connected to the document. We only need the connection with the satellite, and almost everywhere there is a connection with a satellite. All right, step number 5. It's wood tracking system. It's done. It's implemented for all the forest users. It collects data on the starting volume, and it collects everything smoothly and nicely until the time you will sell your wood on online auction. By the way, from 2021, we are selling round wood on online auction. Before that, it was the practice of direct agreements, And actually, when we change that and when we move to online auctions, actually, that's why of the reason why we performed so good on that previous digit that you saw. So it's done, but we want to spread it further on. We want our woodworking company to use that as well. So that will be our next step. Step number 6. It's not done. It's only the project. But what is that? It's electronic declaration of operations. And it is something that you might compare to online banking that you have. But instead of cards with the balances that are available for you in money, you will have your balances with available timber volumes. We have such kind of system that we use for declarations for the state workers. So that will be something like that, but for the operations with wood. And step number 7, really, really important step. This is electronic certificate of origin. We are launching that less than in a week. Less than in a week, all business in Ukraine that is exporting wood will be using this new system, this new platform. What's the biggest difference, how we have it now, and what's gonna change? For now, for exportation operation, you ought to have a list of documents, but some of these documents are really, really easy to make. And we have no right, and our regional departments have no right to check the accuracy of this document and check if it's valid. Everything will change with step number 7, because when you will be preparing and when you will requesting that document, you will have to prove for the system that the origin of this wood you want to export does have the connection with our basic documents, which is electronic login ticket, and which is number 4, the transportation document. If you will not be able to prove the system that there is attraction between these steps, you will not be able to get the certificate. So everything will be changed in a couple of days. And if to be more precise, it's going to happen on 16th of December this year. So that is pretty much it. I try to be short. If you have any questions, ready to answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Victor, for your presentation. For questions, I believe we will have possibility to ask them and receive answer in the end of our session. But indeed, that was really interesting presentation, indeed. So thank you for this. And now I would like to deliver a word to Mr. Ihor Khobchak, the Deputy Head of the State Water Agency of Ukraine. And it's well known that water is one of the most vulnerable resources to climate change. And therefore, I would like to ask, what is the measures which undertaken by the Water Agency to address this issue? Mr. Khobchak, floor is yours.
You hear me? Good morning, colleague.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for the inviting to COP28. My English is not very good, so I ask a translator to help me. Let me introduce our presentation, Water Resource Management in Ukraine, current state and plans for the future. Презентацію видно? Presentation, please. Окей. В Україні визначено 9 річкових басейнів, 7 з яких транскордонні та 9175 масивів поверхневих вод на них визначено.
Ukraine has identified 9 river basins. 7 of them are transboundary and 9,175 surface water bodies.
Річковим басейнам України притаманні такі головні водно-екологічні проблеми. Це забруднення органічними речовинами, забруднення біогенними речовинами, забруднення небезпечними речовинами, гідроморфологічні зміни, зміни клімату. І ці проблеми є характерні не тільки українським річкам, але й європейським.
River basins in Ukraine have certain water and environmental issues like organic pollution, biogenic pollution, hazardous substances pollution, hydromorphological alterations, climate changes. However, these problems are typical not only for Ukrainian rivers, but also for the European ones.
За результатами проведеної оцінки ризиків антропогенних впливів на стан вод в рамках підготовки планів управління річковими басейнами ще до початку військової агресії Російської Федерації, встановлено, що 62% масивів поверхневих вод під екологічними ризиками, а 40% під ризиком гідроморфологічних змін.
The results of risk assessment of anthropogenic impact affecting the water status, which was held in the course of preparation of river basin management plans. That happened before the onset of the Russian aggression. And the results showed that 62% of the surface water bodies have environmental risk, and 40% of them have hydromorphological alteration risk.
Нова глобальна загроза – це війна Російської Федерації проти України, що пришвидшує зміни клімату, збільшує викиди парникових газів, сприяє підвищенню рівня глобальної температури. Аномальні посухи та паводки, нові температурні рекорди – це також наслідки зростаючих зміни клімату.
The new global threat, that is the Russia's aggression on Ukraine, accelerates climate change, increases greenhouse gas emissions, and contributes to global temperature level rise. Abnormal droughts and floods, new temperature records, all of them are also consequences of the growing climate change.
Військові дії призводять до забруднення поверхневих і підземних вод, важкі метали, нафтопродукти, токсичні та небезпечні сполуки забруднюють воду внаслідок вибухів, ракетних ударів та аварій на нафтопереробних заводах.
Military actions result in pollution of surface and groundwaters, heavy metals, petroleum products, toxic and hazardous compounds pollute water due to explosions, missile attacks, and accidents in oil refineries.
Фіксується перевищення концентрації ртуті, міді, цинку, марганцю, вмісту поверхнево-активних речовин та нафтопродуктів. Перевищення можуть сягати від 2 до 200 разів. Дністер забруднені нафтопродуктами, наприклад, після ударів. Частки вибухових речовин та палив потрапляють у водні об'єкти. Це в основному токсичні речовини канцерогенної дії, нітротолуол, тринітротолуол, динітротолуол, що становлять значну загрозу для здоров'я населення.
The recorded concentrations of mercury, copper, zinc, manganese, content of surfactants and petroleum products are high and may be from 2 to 200 times exceeding the norm. For example, the Dniester River is polluted by petroleum products heavily. Explosive and fuel particles get into water bodies. They are mostly toxic substances of cancerogenic nature, nitrotoluene, trinitrotoluene, dinitrotoluene, for example. These substances represent significant threat to the health of population.
Next slide, please. Триваючі військові дії не є перепоною для планування відновлення та впровадження євроінтеграційних змін та виконання зобов'язань, отриманих в контексті набуття статусу країни-кандидата.
The ongoing military actions are not an obstacle to plan recovery and implement Euro integration changes, as well as to perform commitments undertaken in the context of acquiring candidate country status.
Повоєнне відновлення України має плануватись з урахуванням екологічної стійкості в майбутніх інвестиціях та європейських правилах. Ключові принципи – зелена відбудова, відновлення чистого та захищеного довкілля, відтворення та невиснажливе використання водних ресурсів.
Ukraine's post-war recovery can be planned with attention paid to environmental resilience in future investments and European rules. The key principles are green reconstruction, recovery of a clean and protected environment, reproduction and sustainable use of water resources.
Природоорієнтовані рішення мають стати інструментом для реалізації цих принципів. Україна завершує розробку планів управління річковими басейнами до кінця року. Вони будуть оприлюднені для громадського обговорення.
Nature-based solutions shall become an implementation tool for these principles. Ukraine finalizes development of water basin management plans. They will be offered for public discussion by the end of the year.
Природоорієнтовані рішення інтегровані в програму заходів планів управління річковими басейнами, тобто плани управління річковими басейнами включатимуть заходи з адаптації до змін клімату, природоорієнтовані рішення в управлінні водних екосистем, це відновлення та впорядкування, джерел та витоків річок, відновлення заплав та управління ними, відновлення і захист прибережно-захисних смуг і ренатуралізація річок.
Nature-based solutions are integrated in the measures program of the river basin management plans. It means that these plans will be supplemented with the following measures: climate change adaptation measures, nature-based solutions for aquatic ecosystems management, recovery and enrichment of springs and sources of rivers, recovery and management of floodplains, recovery and protection of coastal protective strips, and renaturalization of rivers.
ПУРП, плани управління стануть одним з важливих інструментів у вирішенні основних водних проблем країни. Програма заходів планів управління річковими басейнами містить 243 заходи, пов'язані з відновленням гідрологічного режиму річок і їх природних характеристик.
The water basin management plans will become one of the important tools for solution of the main water problems in the country. Their measures programs include 243 measures, and all these measures are aimed to restore hydrological river regimes and their natural characteristics.
На шляху до ефективного менеджменту і відновлення водних екосистем є певні напрацювання. Розроблені методичні рекомендації з відновлення гідроморфологічних характеристик водотоків, що містить практичні вказівки стосовно планування та здійснення заходів з відновлення водотоків.
There are certain achievements on the way to efficient management and management of aquatic ecosystems recovery. The guidelines, for example, the guidelines for recovery of hydromorphological characteristics of watercourses that have been developed by us. They contain practical recommendations concerning planning and implementing measures for watercourses recovery.
В рамках підтримки ОБСЄ, процесу зміцнення транскордонного співробітництва між Молдовою та Україною та сталого розвитку в басейні річки Дністер було реалізовано демонстраційний проект, що сприяє екологічному відновленню річки Ягорлик, однієї з притоків Дністра. Це заходи були реалізовані в рамках проекту створення транскордонного співробітництва та інтегрованого управління водними ресурсами в басейні річки Дністер, який був реалізований ОБСЄ в співпраці з ПРООН та ЄКООН у 2017-2021 роках із-за фінансування Глобального екологічного фонду.
With the support of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, we aimed at strengthening transboundary cooperation between Moldova and Ukraine and sustainable development in the Dniester River Basin. The demonstration project has been implemented, which contributes to environmental recovery of the Yagorlik River one of the Dniester tributaries. The measures have been implemented under the project called Creation of Transboundary Cooperation and Integrated Water Resources Management in the Dniester River Basin. This project was implemented by the OSCE in cooperation with the United Nations Development Program and the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe in 2017-2021 and was funded by the Global Environmental Facility.
Продовження такої діяльності планується і в подальшому. Розпочато планування та запуск проєкту Глобального екологічного фонду, розширення транскордонного співробітництва та інтегрованого управління водними ресурсами в басейні річки Дністер шляхом впровадження стратегічної програми дій, в рамках якого планується продовження пілотних проєктів по відновленню річок.
This activity will be continued in the future as well. We are planning and launching the project of the Global Environmental Facility. The project is called Enhancing Transboundary Cooperation and Integrated Water Resources Management in the Dniester River Basin through the implementation of Strategic Actions Program. Under this project, further pilot project of rivers recovery are planned.
Окрім того, питання відновлення територій внаслідок руйнування греблі Каховської ГЕС має здійснюватись з урахуванням природоорієнтованого підходу.
Moreover, recovery of the territories after damage to the dam of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plants has to be performed with the nature-based approach in mind.
Україна переймає міжнародний досвід в управлінні водними ресурсами, зокрема і в проводженні природоорієнтованих рішень для подальшого розв'язання основних водно-екологічних проблем країни.
Ukraine adopts international practices in water resources management, in particular in implementing nature-based solutions for further addressing the country's main water and environmental challenges.
Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Hapchak, thank you for the presentation, and I really appreciate to see here information about the river basin management plans and integrations there, NBS, and our organization is partially helping in this work as well. So thank you for your great work. And now I would like to pass the word to the next speaker, which is Alberta De Lunga. And here I would say that since I joined WWF, one of my first meetings was with Food and Agriculture Organization. And when I arrived to FAO Kyiv office, I met there Alberta. So who relocated to Ukraine in order to help to make reforms in forestry sector in our country. So Alberta, I appreciate this. I think my colleagues as well. So I have a question to you. What do you think from your perspective of view? Does forestry management and integration of NBS is possible during the war times in Ukraine? What is the vision for further development of forestry market of FAO organization in Ukraine? Alberta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Konstantin. Thank you so very much for your question. Thank you for welcoming me so warmly. I really appreciate. And I have some answer to your question that I would like to show to you and to the audience through a PowerPoint presentation. So if you allow me, I'm going to share with you the presentation. Okay.
It's on the screen, Alberta.
Yes, I'm just about to share it. I'm sharing. Do you see it? Do you see? I think so. Hello?
Alberto, we see very well.
Very good. So, first of all, I would like to thank especially the government of Ukraine through the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Resource Management for inviting FAO to speak at this important event organized by the government of Ukraine in support of forestry. As you have mentioned, Konstantin, I'm very happy also to say that I'm based in Ukraine, and since my arrival, I have cooperated strongly with a lot of national institutions through a lot of colleagues, and as person, I'm really happy for the work that we have done together and for the achievement. Of course, we have in front of us a challenging work to carry, but I'm confident that slowly by slowly we will manage to achieve what we are planning together with the colleagues. Before starting the presentation, I would like to reiterate the point of FAO. You know, FAO is an organization, is a technical agency, but works along the mandate of the United Nations. And the main target of the United Nations is to continue to achieve and to advance the work in respect of the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is a work that is unbelievably challenging, especially because the world is facing a lot of shocks that comprise, of course, the huge challenge imposed by climate change, that comprise a lot of disasters that are happening. And unfortunately, it's also comprised the effects of war in many countries, including Ukraine. So, having said that, FAO is still trying to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And because of this, especially in the forestry sector, the sector in which I'm working in Ukraine, FAO, together with its national partners and in collaboration with Forest Europe, has prepared a forestry strategy in accordance with the UN mandate, the Sustainable Development Goal, and in line with the FAO forestry priorities. This is very important to underline because the work that we have done is not the idea of FAO. This is the work that we have done together with our colleagues, starting with the Ministry of Environment, following with the State Forest Resource Agency, and continuing with all the local national civil society, the involvement of all the possible agencies. So on the last 24 November 2023, FAO officially released the Forest Support Strategy, which was approved by the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine as the strategy of support the forestry sector of FAO. The Forestry Support Strategy encompasses issues identified during meetings and field visits together with the local partners, and identifies the priority needs to support a forestry sector, which we know has been severely damaged by the war, as it was indicated by the previous colleagues. The FAO Forestry Support Strategy is a document that has been initially planned for a period of 5 years and has an estimated budget of about $40 million. Again, we are a United Nations technical agency, so we need to refer to our mandates. And the forestry strategy builds upon 4 pillars or priority of actions that are the priority of actions identified by FAO Forestry. The first pillar or priority of action is the protection of forest and enhancing forest resilience, halting deforestation and forest degradation. The second important pillar is also agroforestry and its reforestation and afforestation. The third pillar is the conservation and sustainable use of forests to enhance forest-based livelihoods. And the fourth pillar is the improvement of forest-related data collection capacities. Based on these four pillars, FAO has identified potential solutions or priority action to be taken. The first action, which is relevant and fundamental, is to assess the damages and losses of the forestry sector due to the war. Third action is the strengthening of the sustainable forest management to achieve sustainable forestry. The fourth is the demine and restore and remediate degraded and polluted lands by the war through the use of trees, especially fast-growing trees. Another important issue is the use of sustainable wood for a green reconstruction of the country. The support to the Ukrainian alignment with EU forestry policy and legislation. We know very well that Ukraine is a formal candidate for membership of Europe, and this is an important issue to be taken into consideration. And then we also find that there is a strong need to raise awareness on forestry and forestry through communication. And then last but not least, we have just talked about the strengthening of sustainable forest management. We feel that you cannot strengthen sustainable forest management without having back in place the Forest Management Plan Institute that unfortunately is not working 100% of its efficiency because it was heavily bombed last year during the first initial months of occupation of Ukraine. For this, we feel that this is an urgency to be addressed, and as FAO, we have already prepared a project concept note to be shared with potential donor countries. But having said that, we have, thanks to the support of one of the most important donors in Ukraine, which is EU, FAO has already initiated to implement, partially to implement, some of the activities that I have just reported. And indeed, FAO is funding a huge project in Ukraine, of which a small component is allocated to forestry. And within the framework of this small component, we are already addressing 3 different activities. We are supporting the alignment of the Ukrainian policy to the EU forestry policies. We are supporting FRAO. Before we had heard about this monitoring system, and we are supporting the government of Ukraine through FRAO to develop a newer and more effective wood tracking system. And last but not least, again, a theme that was mentioned before, we are going to implement in the area of the Carpathians a forest management plan, which for the first time for this country takes into consideration the multifunctional use of forest to increase the environmental value of forest. It will be just a showcase, and it's planned to be in a relatively small area of forest that is has been almost identified in a very small surface, which is 2,000 hectares of forest. But it is just a small plan, but we consider it quite important because it will showcase most of the theories and the practice that have been already introduced by my predecessor, Victor Small. Okay, these are just preliminary activities. Of course, we need much more, as I was mentioning, and we need to seek for the technical and economic support of partner countries because the plan is quite ambitious. And because of this, together with the government of Ukraine, we are planning to run a number of events in order to involve the international community to support the country also in forestry. we are planning, let's say, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environmental Protection is calling a first meeting, which is we call donor conference, to seek the involvement, as I said, of most important participants, mainly donor countries and funding agencies. This event is going to happen this week, next Thursday, 14 December 2023. We would have wished, together with the country, to have an in-person meeting. But you know, the situation here is critical and people has difficulty to travel to Ukraine in a country in war. So very unfortunately, this first event is being planned only in hybrid mode. So people that will be in Ukraine will have the possibility to attend in person, but we don't want to prevent the participation of international community to this meeting. So this is the reason why this meeting in hybrid mode. However, with the government of Ukraine, we still feel the importance to have meetings in person. So this meeting will be followed by a second meeting that will be called between February and March 24, and this meeting will be in person. However, very unfortunately, again, this meeting cannot be planned in Ukraine, again, for security reasons. We hope this will happen soon. And for the time being, because of the urgency of commit the international community, we are going to have this meeting in person in Prague, in the Czech Republic, thanks to the availability of the Czech Republic government to support Ukraine and to invite participants in their own country. Last but not least, another initiative that we are running together with the Ministry of Environment of Ukraine is a donor conference in Germany, because also Germany has offered to support. This conference is planned to happen on January 24, so the forthcoming months, and will be a conference open mainly to national potential partner and supporter of Ukraine. Having said that, I thank you very much for the attention. I'm sorry if I took too much time, and I'm open to discussion in case. Thank you so much.
Alberto, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I believe that we will have some few minutes for questions afterwards. And I would like to remind now to all speakers who remain, just let's try to be in time. And now I will give the floor to Ms. Francesca Tanneberg, who is from Zuka Foundation from Germany. And I know that you've worked for some projects which was for Ukraine. And since we discussed your presentation, probably we can partially address the issue of agriculture on revetted peatlands. So, Francesca, floor is yours. And again, let's try to have presentations in 5-7 minutes.
Thank you very much. I will do my best to be concise. I'm a peatland scientist. I'm also here to present results on peatlands in other countries. We did the Global Peatlands Assessment, for example, recently, and I'm very glad that I can speak here in the Ukraine Pavilion about this issue in Ukraine. And this is work also of many of my colleagues at Mikhail Zuko Foundation, and especially Olga Denishchuk. Yeah, and let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So we talk about water. So in times of climate change, we need to talk about droughts as well. So this is a map of the Atlas of the World Resources Institutes with the water risks. So Ukraine is currently classified as low to medium, but you see that there are regions of drought risk. And Ukraine experiences droughts almost every year. And there's a tendency actually that they are moving to the north of the country. If you look here at this area here in the north, this is the territory of drained peatlands in Polisia region. And my colleagues also reported that local communities, for example, in Chernihiv Oblast, they are now really experiencing severe water stress and are very open and asking for support to re-wet peatlands, actually, to keep them as wet sponges in the landscapes. I mean, this is the function these ecosystems can have. For the time of the recovery after the war, Ukraine will need a lot of water for people, but also for industry, more than is currently available. Next slide, please. This is a rather old map, but it indicates a bit the distribution of these peatland ecosystems in Ukraine. So there's a stronghold with a large percentage of the land cover in the north, and then it's getting less towards the south. There are around 1.5 million hectares of peat soils in Ukraine, bit less than, for example, in my country, in Germany, and they cover 2.3% of the land surface. The majority is in the north, and approximately 80% of these peatlands have been drained in the past, mainly for agriculture. And this was very common in all European countries. At the same time, 80% of the water that is discharged to Dnieper River is actually coming from Polisia, and 70% of the population of Ukraine depend on water from these sources. And an increasing issue now in many European countries, also in Ukraine, is spontaneous ignition of these soils because they are carbon rich and there can be wildfires. And these wildfires is a new reality, really. And maybe you recall in the year 2020, there were fires on drained peatlands in the Chernobyl exclusive zone, actually coming rather close to the red zone, and with the danger that radioactive sources are released again. Next slide, please. So this is also a map of indicating the moisture in peatlands. Generally, there is rather little information on peatland status and proof data on peatland distribution. There have been very, very extensive inventories in the past in 1959, 1967, and 1999. And these were also partially confirmed by extensive field studies. But we also need to address that these peat layers are disappearing because the carbon in the soil is now removed as CO2 to the atmosphere. So there's a need for also renewed peat mapping. And also to find out really the areas for peatland restoration, because it's very necessary and getting more difficult now to restore peatlands in a changing climate. Next slide, please. We would also like to raise the issue of passability of these areas. You see here a picture of a tank actually stuck in a drained peatland in Kiev Oblast. In a wet peatland, not any military machine is able to pass this area. And there's also a lot of literature. The offensives during World War II, they were all done in winter and in cooperation with peatland scientists, actually, because only very specialized people know at what time in the year the frost is heavy enough that heavy machine can go on these areas. And so to say, nothing can protect a country's border better than wet peatlands. This knowledge is a bit lost now, and it's right time to learn it again. And this is some information from Belarusian colleague actually about the pressure that these peatlands can carry. So just to remind everybody of this potential that is actually also located in the country. Next slide, please. This is a very old Soviet map actually indicating extents of Polisia that have been drained. You see all these extensive systems of drainage channels. And this is also pictures of a drainage system in Zholobnytska drainage system. So the northern part of Ukraine clearly needs restoration and rewetting, as was indicated also by previous speakers. And huge demands of the demanded fresh water actually is currently drained to Belarus and not used in Ukraine. And also the drained areas are no longer productive very much for agriculture. They are degrading, and in many cases, the shallow peat layer is eroded, released as CO2, and the sand is now underneath coming up, and this is not suitable for agriculture any longer. Next slide, please. We are cooperating with the Frankfurt Zoological Society in a project, Polessia Wilderness Without Borders. And this project aims at restoring 4 peatland areas in the north of Ukraine, but also on training and joint capacity building, because there's a big, a lot of emerging questions for hydrologists, for botanists and project managers to carry on restoration projects, and it's very useful to collaborate in this field. And my last slide, please. This is an infographic we made about greenhouse gas emissions from degraded peatlands in different countries. You see that Indonesia is the biggest emitter of these emissions. You may have heard about the drained peatlands there, the tropical peatlands, the fires. Then European Union comes. Also Germany is a key country for such emissions. But there's also at a certain point Ukraine coming in. And there is not very detailed data on it, but we assume at least similar amounts than, for example, in Poland. And so we have the CO2 emissions, we have the high risk of fires. And after joining the European Union, Ukraine will be most likely the fourth important greenhouse gas polluter and emitter in the European Union. So it's also a good time to start thinking about restoration and revetting. And I would really like to stress this is useful and important for water issues, for security issues, for people, for biodiversity, and for the climate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesca. And I think it's not only time for thinking about restoration, but already doing restoration, which is important. And I can say that I am aware about a lot of projects which is ongoing in Ukraine, even during the war. I mean, such projects like restoration of peatlands or different stuff. So thank you for this specific presentation. So now I would like to give a floor to Ms. Inna Hodge, who is a representative of our partner organization, UNDP. And Inna have worked as well for water management issues and particularly on paludiculture. And paludiculture is a very new term for municipalities, for stakeholders maybe. So Inna, please explain what is the strategy of UNDP, how we will elaborate this new ideas or new definitions with our stakeholders and municipalities. What is your plans? 5, 6, 7 minutes. Inna, floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, colleagues. Good morning from a bit snowy Ukraine to sunny Dubai. And now answering your question, I would like to share my screen and explain about our approach. Do you see my screen?
Yes, that's great.
Super. So now I am ready to start. So, dear colleagues, first of all, it's my pleasure to be invited to this important climate conference. And of course, thank you very much for the invitation. And today I would like to present steps done by UNDP Ukraine to promote sustainable agriculture and introduce paludiculture as specific nature-based solution. First of all, being environmentalist for more than 20 years, I have always been curious how to combine, and is it theoretically and practically possible to combine agriculture practices from one side, climate change mitigation, and ecosystem conservation. During this presentation, I will provide some possible solution for this coming from the Ukrainian perspective. So together with my colleagues from UNDP Ukraine and with support of Global Environmental Facility funding, we are currently working on a very innovative and I would say even pioneering project called Promoting Sustainable Livestock Management and Ecosystem Conservation in Northern of Ukraine. We really strongly believe that during the project implementation, we will be able to create a model of an environmentally conscious food system in the north of Ukraine. This model will contribute to the improvement of soil fertility and the preservation of endangered species, as well as to reduction of GHGs. I will briefly mention the main component of our projects. This is land inventory and preparation of integrated land use plans in north of Ukraine. Revetting of 10 peatlands, what previous speaker also mentioned, which is very important for Ukraine on this stage, as well as establishment of a national platform to cooperate with the private sector. This way, we hope to improve livestock management standards and introduce such land use management plans for more than 100 communities in north of Ukraine. Also, we would like to increase capacity of protected areas in landscape and development of very first measurement, verification, and reporting system to assess GHGs emission from peatlands, as well as communication and awareness raising campaign. I would like to focus a bit more on the peatland related part. I will not repeat the same what Ms. Francesca said before, but just briefly mention that drained peatlands account for less than 1% of the global land area, and in the same time, based on the scientific data, they are the source of 6% of total CO2 emission in the world, which is really urgent issues that must be addressed. In Ukraine, such ecosystems are situated mostly in north of the country. That's why UNDP Ukraine project is focused, you can see in the map, on Volyn, Zhytomyr, Rivne, Kyiv, Vinnytsia, Khmelnytsky, and Chernihiv Oblast, which are also among the key livestock regions in Ukraine. The total area of our project is 4 million hectares. Here we are in process of restoring 10 peatlands, which were destroyed and drained during Soviet times. And what about livestock? What about livestock production? Due to acceleration of urbanization and rising maintenance costs, the number of animals and poultry in enterprises and households has significantly decreased. As of the end of 2021, Ukraine's livestock industry, cattle breeding, pig breeding, sheep breeding, etc., was already going through difficult times. As you see on the picture, experts note a critical reduction in the number of cattle and crisis in the operations of dairy and meat cattle breeding segments. State support programs helped certain areas stay afloat, but didn't address the core root of the problem. The solution for peatlands restoration provided by the science, it was mentioned as well, is obvious: to restore the water balance in the landscape. But many questions remain. Among them, can revetted peatlands be used sustainably in agriculture? And if yes, so how? The solution which our team aims to implement in Ukraine is paludiculture. So what is paludiculture? It was the start of our discussion. Paludiculture is wet agriculture and forestry on peatlands. It is possible. Paludiculture combines the reduction of GHGs emission from drained peatlands through revetting with continued land use and biomass production under wet conditions. Paludi, the word paludi comes from the Latin palus, meaning swamp. Traditionally, local people in Polysia region use swamps and swamp plants, but now such approach can help to restore destroyed peatland and equip them with many ecosystem services. So you can see on the picture that we have at least three main options how to use revetted peatlands sustainably using paludiculture. Biomass used for food and fodder. For example, growing and collecting berries, herbs, preparing of pastures. Biomass used for raw materials, reed for construction, reconstruction, furniture, decoration, what is very important in terms of green recovery, and biomass used for energy. For example, energetic willow to be processed into pellets and biogas production. For example, in our project, we anticipate to avoid 3 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And just very briefly, few slides one by one about challenges. I know that projects like ours met many challenges around the globe, but we in Ukraine have like specific one. Based on information received from the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, about 30% of the country's protected areas covering more than 1.2 million hectares have been bombed, contaminated, burned, or otherwise affected by military action. In this slide, you can see where peatlands where we are operating are situated. Next slide presents the information on areas which were under occupation. And the last slide presents the areas which are still mined. Mine and explosives have contaminated northern part of Ukraine, making it one of the largest minefields in the world. The regions of Ukraine are still under threat, including the project-related territories. So anyway, we are moving forward in project implementation, in implementation of such nature-based solution. Very first polyculture cases, we came up with good partnerships and anticipate actually great results. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ina. And it's good to hear that you're open for cooperation. Yeah. And now I would like to give a word to Christine Colvin. Christine Colvin is a policy manager and working for WWF as a policy freshwater lead. And I know that she was worked before as well as in Europe and in Africa on development of water management and developing of community public-private partnerships for water resilience. So, Christine, please tell how to link nature restoration with, let's say, work of municipalities in Ukraine. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And just let my slides come up. I'll apologize in advance. I'm the one that's been coughing in the background. Sorry for the disturbance. And I'm going to be super quick now because I know that we're already running over time. So yeah, I'm going to just focus very quickly on nature-based solutions for water in particular, because these are lagging quite far behind nature-based solutions for carbon and for climate mitigation. Thank you. Next slide. And we're putting such an emphasis on nature-based solutions at WWF for water in particular, because it's freshwater ecosystems that are the most threatened globally. So we've seen the biggest declines in wildlife populations in rivers and lakes in inland waters. And the number that's shown on the slide here, that we've got an 83% decline in wildlife populations in freshwater ecosystems since 1970. So it's the biggest decline of all of the biomes. So it's something that we absolutely have to prioritize and pay attention to. And one of the things, obviously, Ukraine faces incredible challenges, and we've heard about, you know, the forested areas that are now mined, and that there's going to be a huge challenge in terms of regenerating and recovering, hopefully, you know, once the war is over. But one of the things that we would urge, and it's fantastic to see in your river basin management plans, you're already prioritizing nature-based solutions, and already very much with an ethos of build back wetter, you know, which is something that we're really promoting in terms of letting natural flows occur in the landscape so that we have more recharge and more regeneration of these ecosystems. Thank you. Next slide. And of course, you know, we know that the climate crisis, the impacts of the climate crisis are being felt mostly by people and nature through water, through droughts, through floods. And water is to adaptation as carbon is to mitigation. So those of us working in the water sector really kind of promoting water on the adaptation agenda. And that's what we're also doing here at COP at the moment. Next slide, please. The pipeline for water-focused nature-based solutions is lagging behind that for mitigation and carbon because we don't yet have the same markets established. We've got international carbon markets established with varying degrees of integrity, but we're still lagging behind in terms of being able to define clear revenue streams, particularly for investment in bankable nature-based solutions. And this is a real challenge that requires us to look the whole way up this pipeline to what are the enabling policies and regulations that we need to see in place before nature-based solutions become sustainable and viable for the long term. It's the kind of thing we know it's a no-brainer, it makes sense, but it's still in the short term not economically viable. Thank you. Next slide. I just wanted to quickly emphasize groundwater and aquifers as nature's dams, because this is such an important solution for future water storage. And we've already seen in the Ukraine war, water storage and dams being weaponized and loss of that storage as well. And again, in recovery from that and regeneration from that, let's not go back and necessarily reinvent what we've already done, but look at where the science is leading us to now. And of course, we face much lower levels of evaporative losses when we're using groundwater as a water store, natural water store in the landscape. Next slide, please. So something that we're focusing on today on Food, Water and Agriculture Day at COP is the launch of this freshwater challenge. And this is where it's a country-led initiative, and we are aiming to meet the targets for restoration that are under the Global Biodiversity Framework. So globally, those targets are 300,000 kilometers of rivers and 350 million hectares of wetlands committed to restoration by 2030. So that's the kind of 30 by 30. So really critical for all wetlands, especially peatlands, which have this, you know, double role in mitigation as well. And really the purpose of the Freshwater Challenge, it's not a new target. That target's already been set in the GBF, but it's making sure that action happens at a national scale much more quickly and we get to the work that's needed. So we want to see freshwater ecosystems mainstreamed in NDCs, in national adaptation plans, and their role fully acknowledged. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is a quick summary of the Freshwater Challenge, and it was born out of Ramsar, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and sorry, that should be GGA, the Global Goal on Adaptation. We're at the end of 2023 now, where we've got more countries who are joining in, and we're going to have a big ministerial event this afternoon launching that. But next year is when the really hard work starts, because that's when we have to focus on how do we do this, not just what are we doing and who's doing it, but how are we going to make this happen? So that by 2025, the commitments are specified, which rivers, which wetlands, where are these areas that are going to be restored, and how are they going to be prioritized in national strategies? Next slide, please. So, in fact, I've just heard now that we've just had Pakistan also joining this morning. Certainly better late than never. These are the countries that are joining and where we will have representatives this afternoon. It's one of the COP presidency's water outcomes, particularly for today, for food, water and agriculture. And of course, we would love to see Ukraine being part of this. And from what I've heard today about the way that you're already mainstreaming nature-based solutions, you know, it would be a great ask for Ukraine to be part of this. The door isn't closed. We've just had a big push for new countries to join for COP28, but countries are welcome to join at any time. And we would love to see Ukraine being part of this as well. Next slide, please. And I think I'm done. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for your attention.
Ms. Colvin, thank you so much. I know that you have to go to different meetings, so yeah, up to you for this. But thank you for presentation, and thank you for inviting Ukraine to join your initiative. Yeah. And now I have to say that we're out of time, but I would like to give the floor to my colleague Anna Lobchenko for a few minutes only, who will speak on one of initiatives with creation of a digital platform of forestry restoration. Ghana, floor is yours, but please take care that for a few minutes because we have different event here.
Thank you, Konstantin. It's challenging, but I will try my best. Thank you very much for invitation to be a part of such an interesting panel, an important panel. And I would like to talk a little bit on science-based approach to forest restoration and somehow to present project we are working on digital platform for Ukrainian forest restoration. And all of us already know and today could hear that plenty of initiatives are running now in the world on forest restoration, and many countries declare different pledges on forest restoration. And Ukraine is not aside. We have a global initiative in the country on a green country and planting new forest and numerous pledges to do it. And in the world globally, we also have a lot of such pledges and commitments should be done. And I would like to stress how symbols of such initiatives evolve from the planting trees to the global and complex approach on ecosystem restoration that is reflected in the logos of different initiatives. And being focusing on nature-based solutions, it's a perfect tool to achieve those pledges and of course commit the goals declared different countries. But some question arise if planting trees can harm somehow and damage environment, economy, etc. And yes, it can be. And to consider forest restoration as a nature-based solution, we need to be sure that it can implement 5 key points to consider is a nature-based solution. First of all, forest restoration have to avoid harm to other ecosystems, to other biodiversity elements, as meadows, grasslands, peatlands, whatever. Another point that forest restoration have provide a long-term resilience, and Mr. Small explained perfectly what does it mean close to nature forestry. And this approach should be also realized in forest restoration practices as far as prevent those significant carbon emission due to pest outbreaks, big scale fires or whatever. And another key point like climate change mitigation and adaptation is closely related to the previous point. When we manage carbon in ecosystems, in forest ecosystems, it also brings a lot of benefits to the society, to the environment, to the economy, and can be as a part of nature-based solution. But also people are important, and human well-being and local context should be also taken in account when we are performing any forest restoration activities. And considering Ukrainian perspective and need of post-war recovery and many activities on restoration, the principle of building back better should be the main one in forest restoration activities as well. And keeping in mind those principles, we are working on the project of a digital platform for Ukrainian forest restoration that have big mission to inspire and practically support the efforts of public, business, or state science-based sustainable forest restoration. So science should be in the first point to implement any activities. And also keeping in mind those broad approach and involvement of different stakeholders. It is the first project on nature restoration that provides applied science knowledge, modern technology solutions, and speaks in easy language to be understandable to everyone. Our main partner is a software IT company, but many other stakeholders are involved. State institutions, scientists, practitioners, NGOs, whatever. Many people are working on the one result to implement this platform. I would like to present briefly some ongoing process, and there is some drafts of the platform we are working. And key points as some main pillars of the platform will be restoration map, support to initiatives, and carbon calculator. If you talk about restoration map, it will have a place for the sites that can be restored by forest, but at the same time, it will be some kind of disclaimer which sites shouldn't be planted with a forest to avoid that harm to biodiversity. Also, it will be available to find nurseries that can provide planting materials, already planted forest, nature conservation areas, or areas that are like dangerous for implementing any activities. And each plot that will be recommended for restoration will have a detailed information how to plant the forest, and more important, how to keep aftercare on the following stages. Supporting initiatives chapter will find information about some advices from scientists, basis of experts and nurseries, some advertisement on financial support from different institutions, and legal regulation overview. Carbon calculator as another important pillar will be the first public and non-commercial calculator based on scientific data. It will consider 3 species, age, and natural zones. Also will be some short methodology on calculation. And as well, to be more understandable, it will convert the result of carbon into the potential carbon footprint on easy examples like consumption of bananas, of watching videos, or whatever. And next steps we are going to work on is the scaling of the platform to other regions of Ukraine, because now we are on the pilot area and on the stage of finalization. And also development of English version to involve international players in the process. Together possible, you are welcome to join, and thank you for your attention. I try to be as short as possible.
Gana, thank you. Colleagues, I believe it would be a little bit challenging to speak, but I have to finalize only one question. To speakers online and offline who stay here. Give one advice, what we should do to mainstream nature-based solutions in forests and in water. So maybe I will ask speakers who online if you're willing to answer. If yes, please raise your hand, and very shortly with one sentence answer.
Maybe if I can.
Yes, Alberto.
Yes. The key issue is strengthening sustainable forest management. Without this, we cannot implement anything. I can go more, but I stop here. I guess it's important. You want me to continue?
Yeah. It's frankly speaking, it's not so good to hear, but yeah, we got your point. Victor, you will take word.
Yes, thank you. In order to accomplish these new approaches, you ought to have some scientific base first, on first place. Then you ought to have some experimental base on the second place. And if we are talking about implementing any new methodology, we have to understand that if we want to do so, we will find possibilities. If we don't want to do that, you will find reasons not to do that. So that's my conclusion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smal. I know that speakers cannot see the auditory, but I would like to announce that Mr. Strelets, the Minister of Environment Protection of Ukraine, joined this meeting. So thank him for this. And Francesca, you are such an expert in water. So what would be your advice?
Very unfortunately, we cannot hear.
Yeah, but that's fine. I don't think that you need to to repeat. Okay, colleagues. So I believe that we out of time. That's why some speakers already passed to different events, and I believe that it's time to make a summary. And summary would be very, very short. We have only one way. If we speak about NBS, we should implement NBS while Ukraine post-war recovery and restoration. It's only one way we should understand this. And summarizing what we discussed today, there's maybe 3 pillars how to get this. First, we need to provide institutional capacity building. We need to find possibility to make NBS bankable. And I speak here maybe about some financial support schemes. And of course, legislation. I mean, different types of legislation, primary and secondary legislation. We today spoke about water basin management plans, etc. These activities of State Forestry Agency. So I started with that led this discussion would be as much instrumental as it could be. And we should take some ideas what we discussed today and bring them out of these walls and go work for rebuilding Ukraine. So thank you, colleagues. Panel is finished.